Good evening, everyone. I'm Shreya, student co-convener of Center for Legal Aid Program, NUSRL Ranchi. I'm your host for today's evening. On behalf of CLAP and Pro Bono India, I welcome the resource person, Dr. Koushik Bagchi, members of the organizing committee, Dr. Kalpesh Kumar L. Gupta, founder of Pro Bono India, Dr. Shweta Mohan, faculty co-convener, CLAP, student coordinators, and all the participants to the seventh day of short-term course on legal aid and allied laws. Yesterday, we had an amazing session with Mr. Milan Pitia, who gave his insights on government initiatives for access of justice. For today's session, we have with us Dr. Koushik Bagchi. Mr. Koushik Bagchi is an assistant professor and faculty convener of the Center for Legal Aid Program at NUSRL Ranchi. He did his LLB and LLM from University of Burdwan and qualified National Eligibility Test in 2011. He teaches company law, civil procedure code, health law, administrative law at UG and PG level. Previously, he was working at Law College, Durgapur and Bimal Chandra College of Law. His PhD degree topic was rehabilitation of mentally ill survivors, socio-legal study with special reference to state of Jharkhand. He has several notable publications at reputable places in the domain of mental health law. Thank you. We welcome you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are
Hello?
audible. Yes, sir, you are audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first of all, thank you participants for spending your hectic mental day and then coming and sitting over here and giving time for this particular session on mental illness and mental health. So one question primarily I would like to ask, Asha Harsh, can we unmute the participants? Let the session be interactive in nature.
Yes, sir. I think they can raise their hand and we can unmute them.
So the first thing which we would like to put before you all is that why are we so interested about this particular topic of mental health? Everyone is neglecting this topic, isn't it? If we look into the scenario of the politicians, where is the PPT coming? Just a second.
Rahul, you can try sharing now.
Without the PPT, and then we'll come across the PPT. So when we look into the scenario of mental illness, we find out that at present, if we look into the Indian population, we find out that near about 15% of the total Indian population is suffering from one or the other mental illnesses. Not only this has become a relevant topic for discussion after the COVID-19 scenario. So we all took into consideration this aspect of mental illness, specifically after the COVID-19 scenario, into consideration. And when we look into the ratio of doctor and patient, psychiatrist and patient ratio in India, we find out that there are only 0.7% of psychiatrists available for the purpose of treating near about 1 lakh population in India. So that is the basic gap between the kind of treatment which is required to give for people who are suffering from mental illness and the persons who will be serving this mentally ill. Now, when we look into this particular mental illness, first of all, we have to take into consideration the historical backdrop or the historical background for the purpose of development of this particular mental illness and the legislations. Now, when we look into this particular history, if the PPT could be shared, it would have been very nice. Okay. So if you look into this particular segment, we find out that the mental illness history, if we look into the nature of treatments, the treatments were very much inhuman and barbaric in nature. Even there were treatments where a hole was made in the skull of the human being because it was thought that the mental basic reason behind the cause of mental illness is that certain unwanted spirits have come within the body of a human being, and that's why he is behaving in an abnormal manner. So as a result of which a hole was made in the skull, which was called as the Therapeutic technique, and by virtue of that particular hole in the skull, that the evil spirit will evaporate from that particular skull. Not only this, we find out that all the religions, maybe Hindu, maybe Islam, maybe Christian, all of them also help the society in stigmatizing these mentally ill people. So when we consider the aspect of Hinduism, we find out in our Vedas also that on one side they are speaking about the recreational facilities which are to be provided for mentally ill, but on the other hand we are also talking about the aspect of isolation of these mentally people from the society. If we look into the aspect of Islamic religion, we find out the periphery of black magic or Kala Jadoo. Even Bible, when we look into Christianity, we find out that it speaks about exorcism. So as a result of which, we find out that every religion also played a vital role for the purpose of creating a stigma against this mentally ill people. Take out the first slide. Second slide. Okay. Second slide. Yeah. So, I think I have already discussed this particular aspect, which has been given in the first slide. Move to the next slide. Okay. So, we find out there is a pathetic history of the treatment of mental illness in the society. Whatever religion, whatever structure, even if we talk about cultures, the Egyptian culture, the Chinese culture, the Mesopotamian culture, whatever culture we speak about, we find out that the nature of treatment was very inhuman and barbaric. Sometimes bloodletting was done, sometimes asking the patient to make him vomit several times. And every culture or every religion focused upon the particular point that this concept of mental illness occurs only due to the unwanted evil spirit which enters in our world. So as a result, the whole society got stigmatized with relation to mental illness. And we find out that whenever we see a mentally ill people, we also try to protect ourselves. Kahin maar to nahi dega, whether he will not hit me, right? So that is our condition. We always are in a stigmatized position related to a mentally ill person. Kahin humko noch to nahi dega. So these all aspects play a vital role. Now, when we look into the history of mental illness in hospitals, we find out that during the Vedic periods, there was no such concept of hospitals, but these recreational therapies or the concept of isolation was taken into consideration. But when we look into the concept of hospitals, primarily in India, there were no such hospitals. Though in Arabic times, hospitals were created by Mughal empires. Okay, that also not within the periphery of India now, it was created somewhere else. Okay. But if we look into the hospital scenario, we find out that the Britishers were the persons who created the mental hospitals. So what was the reason for creation of these mental hospitals by the Britishers? Were they well-wishers for the Indians and wanted to treat us very nicely? That's why they wanted to prepare these mental illness hospitals in India. Obviously, no. The basic reason behind it is that once they started to have a control over administrative control over India, what they did is that they asked the agricultural farmers to grow poppy and neem. I think everyone is aware about this particular aspect. Poppy seeds, posto dana, the Bengalis call it. We are very fond of posto. Okay, so posto and neem, these were the basic revenue generating, income generating things for the purpose of Britishers. So when they asked the agricultural laborers to grow this or force them to grow this, they also addicted them to poppy seeds. And I think everyone is aware. Afim. What do we call afim in English? If anyone can assist me from the audience. Afim was used to be created from this posto seeds. Thank you. I can't see actually. So what happens is that opium, very good. So these poppy seeds were not only consumed by the Indian agriculturists, but they were also consumed sometimes by the Britishers. And they also fell in trap. So what happened is that at a time, there was one survey, Bengal survey, conducted for coming to a conclusion that how a particular government is earning revenue from which state and what is the reason of less revenue. Now, when this Bengal survey was conducted, it was found out that most of the agriculturists as well as the Britishers were now mentally sick due to large consumption of poppy seeds. So at that time, during that British era, it became very difficult for the Britishers to first of all pick up a deputed English officer from here, give him ship fare, carry him to England, do his treatment, and again return back to India with that officer. So it became an expensive matter for the Britishers. So in order to cut the cost, what they did, they primarily set up the mental hospitals or mental asylums as they were called at that time. And these mental hospitals were set up. So we find out Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, each and everywhere, we find out that these mental hospitals were created. Now, two positive things which we have to take into account. While we were dealing with the first point, that is the history of mental illness treatment in the society, we find out that there were two basic doctors, Aristotle and Hippocrates, who first of all came to a conclusion that this mental illness is not created by any evil spirit or unwanted spirit, but it is created by imbalance, chemical locha. We have seen one film, na? Chemical locha. So that chemical locha happens in the human body due to four aspects. One is the blood, mucus, bile, and black bile. So this was the first scientific explanation for the purpose of causing of mental illness. So this was the positive point. And second of all, when we look into the history of mental illness in hospitals, we find out that these hospitals were created as because of the survey which was made by the Britishers. And these two things have to be taken into consideration. Now, when we look into the history of mental health legislations in India, we find out obviously at that time the Indian country in India was ruled by the Britishers. So all the Britishers gained power after 1857, after the revolt of 1857, if we all remember, right? So when we take into account this aspect of 1857 revolt, and after the 1857 revolt, when the Britishers gained power of administration over the Indian subcontinent, they started to create legislations in India. But one thing has to be taken into consideration. We found out that society thought differently regarding the mentally ill people. The cultures thought differently about the mentally ill people. The legislatures also thought differently about this mentally ill people. So whatever legislations you see in the history of the universe, you will find out that everywhere these mentally ill people have been segregated from the legal framework, either by this way or that. If we take into consideration the aspect of contract, we find out in case of contract what happens, that if a person is mentally ill, in such circumstance, he cannot perform any contract at all. That means a contract by a insane person is totally void. Second of all, when we look into the civil matters, we find out that if we take into consideration the family laws, etc., we find out that the people, if they are putting any provisions related to the mental illness of the husband or wife in both these circumstances, becomes a vital question of divorce. So we are segregating there also. If we take into consideration the other aspects, criminal law, a person has not to be taken into consideration to be doing any crime if he is suffering from mental illness. Or even if we take into consideration the aspect of limitation law, we find out that he is ceased from filing the suit unless and until the disability ceases. Or sometimes in civil matters, we also find out the aspect of representation by someone else. So that means every periphery of legislature has cut down or shut off the route for channelizing a mentally ill people to go to the courts. Everywhere the legislation has stopped. Now, when we look into this historical background, we find out, let me again come back to the previous story. Just excuse me a minute. So, when we come back to the story about the legislative history, we find out that obviously the British colonial system was there. So 1890, one act was there. And when we look into the Indian legal system, we find out that the Indian Lunacy Act, the Supreme Court Lunacy Act, the High Court Lunacy Act, these all acts came in 1858. And the basic objective of these legislations were the admission of the patient in the mental hospital and the periphery to look into that these people do not leak to the common society, because if they leak to the common society may be affected by it. That means only treating them as a category of subhuman and putting behind them the bars was the basic motive of these legislations. So these legislations continued in India till 1890. Okay. And after that, in 1912, one new act, Indian Lunacy Act 1912, was created in line of the 1890 British Act. Okay, Mental Health Act of 1890 of England was taken into consideration for preparing the Indian Lunacy Act of 1912. And this 1912 Act also was running on the same line of action. That is only putting this mentally ill people behind the mental hospitals and taking care that they don't go out of this restricted arena of that mental hospital and influence the society at all, so that the society becomes protected. Nahi, nahi, bhai, mere paas koi pagal nahi. So that particular thing has to be taken into consideration. Now, when we move further, we find out the legislatures were very much clumsy regarding creating any legislation for the purpose of mentally ill people. That's why we look into that this 1912 enactment was in force in India even after independence till 1986. Okay, see the time limit, 1912 to 1986. Nothing was done. However, we have to take into consideration that just after independence, in 1950, the IPS officers of India, independent India, primarily moved out a specific bill for the purpose of legislating a new mental health act. And that act was enacted in 1987. So how much years? It took near about 37 years for the purpose of coming of the first mental health act in India, independent India, 1987, sorry. And when this act came into existence, this act also suffered from various criticisms, lacunas, because it did not take into consideration the human rights aspect of the people at large. Okay. And as a result, people were also then not treated nicely. I think everyone is aware, or you have seen in movies or films, electric shocks are being given. People, this so-called mentally ill people are chained behind the bars, tied with the beds with bars, with chains. So all these things we have already visualized in our movies. So this scenario obviously was there in our system. Still there. We'll come to that particular thing. But prior to it, let's again come back, fill up this gap between history of mental health legislation and coming of Mental Health Care Act. Now, just prior to the independence, 1938, there were two committees constituted by the British government to look into the superintendence of these mental hospitals which were created by the Britishers. They were aware. They thought that they will stay here more. But unfortunately, they had to go in 1950. So with that objective of staying here, they created a supervisionary committee, which is also sometimes called as the More Committee and the Bhor Committee. So these two committees played a vital role while drafting of this 1987 Act. So they laid down the specific provisions of admission, discharge, okay, and also supervision and monitoring of these mental hospitals, the nursing facilities which were to be provided to these mentally ill people. All those things were taken into consideration by the Board Committee and the Murray Committee. But unfortunately, that came into effect in 1987 while this act came into existence. Now, after this story, let's come to another point. That is in the meantime, India became much concerned about mental health and started the National Mental Health Mission. So this mission had various super programs. It was very much progressive in nature. And due to lacuna of funds, this whole mission crashed and nothing could be done for the purpose of uplifting of the mentally ill people. Now, after this, what happened? India became a signatory to United Nations Convention on Rights of the Persons with Disabilities in the year 2006. That is not at all mentioned in the PPT. I have not given everything in the PPT because if we give everything in the PPT, I am also attending the classes every day. So at the last of the class, we get one response. Sir, will we get the PPT? That means we are not hearing. So if we want to hear, there is no requirement of PPT. So that's why I have not mentioned everything. Okay. So United Nations Convention on Rights of the Persons with Disabilities came into existence in 2006, and India fortunately ratified that particular international. So when India ratified that particular treaty, it had to enact one legislation. And as a result of which, we get this particular Mental Health Care Act of 2017, which is one of the best legislations which has been prepared. But sorry to say, its implementation is zero. Let's come to the facts. Why it's zero? Sir, next slide, please. We'll come over there. But in between, let's take into consideration some other legislations which also plays a vital role for the purpose of taking account of the 2017 enactment. So when we look into the Constitution, we all are aware that the Constitution, under the Constitution Article 21, I will obviously not go to the details of this particular arena. I think everyone has read the Constitution, so I will not interfere on that particular arena in details. So when we look into the Constitution, obviously Article 21, right to life. Right to life includes right to health, and right to health also includes the right to mental health. And when we look into the definition of mental health, we find out mental health is totally correlative to economics. Okay, so if the productivity of the population of a particular country will be good, it can be taken into consideration that the mental health of the people are very good. But if the people are mentally sick, they will be less focusing upon the business activities or their daily activities. So economical activity will be less, and we can come that the country's population is suffering from mental illness. So obviously after 2006 in Constitution, we find out that there were several judicial activism steps taken by virtue of which certain developments were made in the Mental Health Act and the legislation. We'll come to those stories one by one. Then we have also the Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, which was also a resultant of the United Nations Convention on Rights of the Persons with Disabilities 2006. However, we have to take into account that prior to this particular Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, there was another enactment related to the same topic in 1995, which was re-amended and brought to this present shape after the ratification of India. Then obviously we will deal with this critical analysis of this Mental Health Care Act. And we have also got one more enactment, that is Rehabilitation Council of India Act in 1992, which has been also re-amended in 1995. So when we look into the periphery of Rehabilitation Council of India Act, what is its requirements, we'll be dealing with it, okay, in our later slides. Come to next slide. So I was talking about the present Mental Health Care Act 2017. So when we look into the Mental Health Care Act 2017, I said that it is the best enactment ever enacted in the universe. And it's very progressive in nature, but its implementation is zero. If you remember what I said. Why its implementation is zero, we'll come to that particular point. But prior to it, let us find out the reasons. So when we drafted this particular legislation in 2017, we find out that we took account of two basic, we all are in the habit of copy pasting, right? So what we do, the legislatures have also followed that same technique. So what they have copied, they have taken into consideration the WHO yearbook of 2008. This was one of the book issued by WHO in 2008, where they provided certain criteria which must be there in a mental health legislation. So we copied 69 items from that particular yearbook of 2008, and the rest of the enactments, rest of the provisions, we copied from the United Nations Model Code for Mental Health legislation. So bringing both of these things together, we have designed this super enactment. But again, sorry to say, the implementation is zero. Now let's come to the point why its implementation is zero. Its implementation is zero because we find out that this act came in 2017, and if anyone has got a bare act, please open it up and see that this section 1, which talks about its extent, it speaks that it must come into force within a period of 1 year from the date of the consent of the president. But unfortunately, we find out that only 19 states all over India have still notified this enactment. All other states have not yet created the basic legal framework which is required for the purpose of coming of this particular enactment. So what is the legal framework required? Just a moment once more. So when we look into the legal framework, it speaks about that there will be section. Which one? First section. Okay. When we look into the short title, extent and commencement of this enactment, we find out to that particular group. Whatever questions come, you please provide me. Okay. So when we look into this periphery of this particular legal framework, we find out that the first authority which they have created is the Central Mental Health Authority, and under that Central Mental Health Authority, there will be State Mental Health Authority, and in every state, when the State Mental Health Authority will be created, in each and every district, there will be Mental Health Review Board. So this is the legal structure. In every district, Mental Health Review Board, in every state, the State Legal Authority, and at the Central Legal Authority. So obviously the act was enacted by the central government, so they got the Central Mental Health Authority. But states, they have these 19 states who have ratified it, notified it. They have just now created this State Mental Health Authority. District mental health review boards, not at all in existence. How many years have elapsed after the coming of this enactment? 17 to 18, 18 to 19, 19 to 20, 20 to 21, 21 to 22, 22 to 23. We are now coming to 24. So near about 7 years are elapsing. So what we did is that, because we copied this enactment in a hurry without taking into consideration the socio-economical, political scenario of India. What is the socio-economical, political scenario of India? Even if अगर कोई बच्चा घर में बीमार होता है, छोटा, less than 1 year, what do we do first? Anyone having any opinion? What we do? Anyone, please. What we do? I'm asking these questions in between just to understand whether you are all are hearing or not.
Yes, sir, we are hearing to it.
Hey, we don't go to a doctor. We first go to a Ojha, Baba.
Ojha, yes, sir. Bagchi sir, we go to an
मेरे
Ojha.
बच्चे को भूत पकड़ लिया है. Am I right?
Yes, Bagchi sir.
To a certain extent. So
Bagchi
this
sir,
stigma has been inbuilt in our blood in such a manner that we are obviously taking it into consideration that these babas or these ojhas are having certain supernatural power जिससे वो नजर हटा देंगे. They will reveal that particular thing and my kid will be okay. Even if a particular person who is not a kid, but if he is behaving abnormally, the first step which we take is that we go to a Jyotish. Hi, thoda haath dekh dijiye to kya ho gaya? What has happened? Which graha is not working properly? And as a result, we forgot to take the advantage of these two aspects. who are there in the society and who are working as aid givers for the purpose of controlling or combating the aspect of mental illness. How? I will come to the result at the last. Okay. So when we look into the superfine enactment of 2017, we find out that the psychotherapist, this particular definition has been now removed from the periphery of Mental Health Care Act. So who is a psychotherapist? A psychotherapist means who gives you a counseling session. Previously, they were also included under the Mental Health Care Act. So when they are included under the Mental Health Care Act, what happened is that as because we are having a less ratio of doctors, they also aided in giving mental health aid. But as because they are removed, we have again shrinked the periphery of giving mental aid to the mentally ill persons. Now, when we took into consideration, I will take into consideration one and each point, and then come to the remarks, the critical analysis of that particular point. So we find out this next point is advanced directives. What are advanced directives? When we look into the Mental Health Care Act, we find out the advanced directives means if you will become mad after 10 years, you decide what kind of treatment you have to be given just now. So are we still psychologically prepared in such a manner? First question. Second of all, if we are psychologically prepared, then what we'll do? We'll first go to a psychologist and ask him, sir, please suggest me which kind of treatment will be good for me once I will become mad. So as the psychologists are less, we are again putting a burden upon them. Nominative representation, what does it mean? That once the person will become mentally ill, in such circumstance, who will be representing that particular person and assisting him in giving him mental health and care. So that particular thing has to be also filled up just now. So here also we are aware that most of the population in India are not so literate. Okay. Though the literacy level has gone to a large extent, it's much high. But our literacy regarding this mental illness is not so high. So what we will do again, we will go to that particular doctor. Form kaise fill up karna hai? Even we don't go for finding out the forms when we go for the scanning of a particular patient, or when we go to ultrasonography of a particular patient, we don't go through the documents which the hospital asks, right? We sign over it, whatever they ask. So do you think that these things will be effective enough? Now next is informed consent. Obviously, it has also put forward the periphery of informed consent. Whatever treatment you are giving, what will be the effect of it? All these things will be made to you aware prior to giving you any medication. What are the disadvantages? What are the bad effects? Itna kam doctor hai. And if they start giving you lectures on that particular point, I think 2 of the patients will be missing. Next, when we look into the Constitution and speak about Article 21, right to life and right to health, I think everyone is aware about these 3 A's and C. One is affordability, accessibility, accountability, and continuity of service. So if to a health service, these 3 A's, C's are not attached, that does not lead to the protection of right to health, and as a result, that does not lead to the concept of right to mental health also. So as a result of which, this Mental Health Care Act has obviously taken into consideration the triple A and C's. And it has also taken into consideration, as a response to it, there is recognition of right to live with dignity and right to live as a part of society. Obviously, when we look into the periphery of this enactment, we find out that it also speaks about right of confidentiality. That means the inputs which we are providing to a doctor or to any psychologists are not to be revealed outside. Okay. So out of these, when we look into the rights of the mentally challenged people, we also find out that there is a right of free legal aid and also grievance redressal mechanism. We'll obviously come to this particular aspects. Let's come to the critical aspects first. First of all, let us understand what is it. Now, there are certain stipulations related to ECT. What is ECT? ECT means electroconvulsive therapy. We are aware through various films that these mentally ill people, if they are so much influenced with mental illness, in such circumstance, they are to be given this ECT, that is electric current. And for the purpose of giving such ECTs, each and every time the concerned High Court sanction must be taken into consideration. So do you think practically that such kind of time is there to the High Courts, that after doing so much of petitions, when they could not finish their time within the, they are already overburdened with so many cases, they can again come back here and give the sanctions of ECTs? So there are certain, again, things that no sterilization of mentally ill patients should be done, and no clinical trials on the mentally ill people should be done. There's a question, I think. Is there any question? Okay. And we are aware that decriminalization of suicide has been made under this particular enactment, but this decriminalization has also a limited restriction. Okay. It is not applicable to all kinds of suicides. Emergency treatment mechanisms has been started. So as a result of which, previously these mental hospitals did not have any emergency treatment facilities. But presently we find out that some of the mental hospitals have emergency treatment facilities also. When we look into the category of reservation, we don't find out any specific provision of reservation in the Mental Health Care Act, but we find out the specific provisions under the Rights of Persons with Equal Opportunities and Disabilities Act 2016. And we find out that the disability criteria is 3%. And out of that 3%, 0.5% is for mentally challenged people. So do you think that there are any vacancies in the last 5 years which you have seen for the mentally challenged people? Please help me out. Next, health insurance. I think everyone is aware that this new act provides for the aspect of health insurance, and this health insurance policies must also cover the mental health insurance. So IRDA, I think everyone is aware, the insurance regulatory department has already, the regulatory authority has already issued one notification by virtue of which all the private as well as government companies shall have the facility of health insurance, mental health insurance also. But if we take into consideration, we find out that the periphery of mental health insurance is very much restricted. Only we can count a handful of companies which have come across for the purpose of health insurance, mental health insurance. Rehabilitation. So obviously, when we look into this whole periphery of mental health, it should take into consideration the aspect of rehabilitation. So if anyone can help me once more, the definition of rehabilitation, of the meaning of rehabilitation. Anyone can put forward your remarks, what is rehabilitation? Has anything come? Anyone? Now, any other idea about rehabilitation? Now, when we look into this whole system of mental illness, we find out that this is an arena where people are stigmatized. The society is stigmatized regarding mental illness. And as a result of which, once you visit a mental hospital, people will stigmatize you. And as a result of a mental hospital, will again, due to the into account, again, the mental illness mentally affect forever, because the society will not allow you to live freely. अरे पगला था, अरे कल तो निकला है पगल खाने से. So they will make such kind of comments, and as a result of which, you will be again forced to go back to the mental hospital. So this is a vicious circle. So in order to break this particular vicious circle, the concept of rehabilitation comes into operation. So what is this rehabilitation? By virtue of rehabilitation, these mentally ill people who are suffering from mental illness are taken into consideration for the purpose of learning certain skills, so that they can, after coming back from the mental hospital, generate some revenue by learning that particular skill and be rehabilitated in the society. That means come back to the society. Now, when we look into one interesting aspect, we find out that the total stay of a mentally ill person in a mental hospital cannot be exceeded more than 3 days. So, a mentally challenged person stay in a mental hospital for more than 30 days, which may be again extended for a period of 30 days, total making of 60 days. So do you think that a common person can learn and earn any skill within a period of 60 days? A normal person, just like me. Can you assure that when a normal person, yes or no? So obviously, when we cannot learn, how do we expect a particular person who is mentally challenged to learn a skill within a period of 30 days or 60 days? It becomes impossible for him. So as a result of which, this periphery of rehabilitation, which has been put forward under the enactment, is just a showpiece which does not have any efficacy at all. Moreover, when we look into this particular aspect of rehabilitation, we find out that these patients are at their own wish. They may choose to come to the rehabilitation center or the occupational therapy center, or if they don't wish, they may not come at all. So that again restricts their scope of learning a skill. And moreover, when we look into this particular enactment, this enactment for the first time takes into account two principles of US Mental Health Act. One is the Community Mental Health Rehabilitation Center and the concept of halfway homes. So what is this community-based rehabilitation center? Where the community will assist him for the purpose of rehabilitating him in the society. And what is the halfway home? The concept of halfway home means a person who is mentally sick, after getting out of that particular mental hospital, will be taken into consideration by a halfway home where he will be given a different identity, and with that different identity, he can live his livelihood. So this aspect has been taken into consideration under the enactment, but when we look to the factual circumstance, I think in Gujarat itself, there are, Gujarat and Maharashtra, there has been one community health center and one halfway homes have been created yet. There are no other created such kind of halfway homes or community-based rehabilitation centers. I was speaking about telepsychiatry. Previously, I was speaking about the triple while we are going through the previous slide. We found out that one place I took into account AAAC, and I said that this particular enactment obviously takes care of this AAA and C. That is accountability, accessibility, affordability, and continuity of service. So this particular periphery of AAAC can be taken into consideration only by mode of telepsychiatry. So what is telepsychiatry? Now obviously, telepsychiatry guidelines have been also issued by NIMHANS. It has also its own lacunas and loopholes. So when we look into this aspect of telepsychiatry, it obviously takes account of the aspect of, just a moment. Come back to that slide where you stopped. Telepsychiatry was the last one. Yeah. So when we look into this particular arena, we find out that the NIMHANS Bangalore has issued one telepsychiatry guidelines. And as per these guidelines, what happens is that a person, there are 13 nodal centers opened up all over India. And these nodal centers are the areas where the people who don't have access to the mental treatment can of telepsychiatry, just like telelaw, as the thing which we were speaking in our earlier class, but there is a specific distinction between telepsychiatry and telelaw. In telepsychiatry, what happens is that the patient has to first visit, primarily he has to visit the mental hospital and take the guidance of the doctor, and also for the revisits or the next visits, he can take the mode of telepsychiatry. And for this particular purpose, 13 nodal centers have been opened up all over. However, there are certain other lacunas of this aspect of telepsychiatry. The lacuna is that when we look into the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, we find out that it puts forward certain restrictions on certain kinds of drugs which cannot be issued through telepsychiatry, which are also restricted through the periphery of telemedicine. I think if one telemedicine guidelines has also come across, we find out that AIMS has issued one guidelines related to telemedicine. Okay, so these telemedicine and telepsychiatry guidelines both restrict the prescription of such kind of drugs which may be very much relevant for a person who is mentally ill. And as a result, though we have again showcased this particular aspect of telepsychiatry, it does not have any efficacy at all. Next slide, please. So, I will come to so obviously, I think now everyone is aware regarding the aspect of Mental Health Care Act 2017 and its implementation. So obviously, we are aware now that its implementation has not become fruitful all over India. And as a result, there are several cases So while taking into consideration the aspect of legal aid, we have found out that there was a point of legal aid, obviously in the aspect of telepsychiatry. So we have conducted several programs related to mental health awareness among the people. And as a result of which, as because we are living in the vicinity of, one is Central Institute of Psychiatry and the other one is RIMPAS, that is the Rajendra Institute of Neuropsychiatry and Allied Sciences. We are able to do such kind of legal aid where we make aware the people regarding their not only rights, but also about the options of telepsychiatry, also about the options of getting medical insurance. We assist the parents whose children are rejected from admission in the schools on the ground of autism or any other aspect. And we also take into account the aspect of RTE Act, which section 8 of which specifically provides that each and every student has the right to education. So obviously, we have taken several initiatives and programs in NUSRL Ranchi. Arey, what are you doing, sir? So obviously, we have already. I think everyone is clear that these are the programs which we have done related to telepsychiatry and mental health in the arena of Ranchi. And truthfully, we will be obviously taking into consideration many other aspects. We often perform nukkad nataks and seminars and conferences, workshops on the issues of mental illness. We also have an MOU with the Central Institute of Psychiatry, by virtue of which we get psychiatrists and psychotherapists who come here at our university. I think after the coming of the COVID-19, everyone is affected with some or the other mental illnesses. So obviously, mental wellness is an aspect which has to be taken into consideration. And when we look into mental wellness, students obviously require mental wellness aspects. One more thing has to be taken into consideration, that whenever we look into this whole arena of mental illness, which can fight mental illness. At present, each and everyone is suffering from one or the other anxiety. We all are studying law as students, and we think that after passing out, what will happen, whether I will get a job or not. AI is coming. So whether I will be, if I am joining in teaching profession, whether it will be helpful or not. If I am joining as a lawyer, see, telelaw has come. So they will be taking aid from there only. What will be my requirement? So what is my use? So AI is one of the aspects which has to be taken into consideration, and in order to curtail the impact of AI, you have to develop your emotional intelligence. So in order to grow your emotional intelligence also, you need to visit a psychologist or a psychotherapist who will guide you with relation to what are the things, what are the challenges which you are facing and how you can tackle those challenges. So that's all. I think if you have any questions or queries related to this topic, please come back to me. Yeah. Any questions or queries by anyone?
If participants have any questions, they can raise their hand. We can unmute them.
Hello.
Or you can just type the questions in the chat box
Yeah,
itself.
if you can repeat the questions for me, it will be very nice for me.
Sure, sir. I'm waiting. So we have a question here from Anandita Das ma'am. Is there any course on mental health and legal sphere?
You are not at all audible, Shreya.
Harsh sir, am I audible? Am I audible now?
Shreya, just wait a minute.
Okay, sure.
Yes, Shreya, you may start.
Okay, so participants can put their questions in the chat box. Sir, we have one question here. Is there any course on mental health and legal sphere?
We are planning to start shortly.
Okay.
This is totally a gray area. So
Uh,
obviously we have a lot of chance to work upon it. Yeah.
yes, sir, we have another question. Sir, how to
Yeah.
deal with mental health issues that students face during stressful studies and pressures?
So I said that you have to develop your emotional intelligence and take care of regards of emotional intelligence in order to tackle these problems of mental illness. What is emotional intelligence? For that, you have to join that course, which will be starting shortly.
Okay, I think we can wrap up now. Thank you so much, sir, for an informative session on mental health law. Now I welcome Dr. Kalpesh Kumar, founder of ProBono India, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Shreya, and thank you very much, Koushik sir, for delivering and talked about the integrity of mental health, like how it started, journey, and then history. So let me tell you, this was, I think, maybe the second. Let me take up question. There are some raised hand. Sorry, I would give a vote of thanks later on. Dr. Menon, over to you because we got some questions.
Okay, sure, we can unmute them.
Yes,
Her,
Dr.
sir,
Menon,
if you,
over to you.
yes, her, sir, if you may
Question: how
please
can we
unmute them.
find out if a person is suffering from mental health issue? How can we find out a person is suffering from a mental health issue?
Shall I address?
Yes, 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 sir.
So obviously, we find out here and there several mentally ill people are wandering. So there are strict stipulations under the 1987 Act, as well as we have tried. This is from the area from where I started my research. So what happened is that one fine morning, I found an old lady sitting just beside the gate. And when I went and asked her, what is the reason of your sitting here? The security guards came with lathis and said, Sir, pagli hai, chhod dijiye, sir, pagli hai, chhod dijiye. So what I did is that I tried to go and help her, and this started my learning process. So when I went to the mental hospital, I took 2 students and went to the mental hospital and tried to admit that particular person. The mental hospital said that we cannot admit her. Why? Because there is a specific provision in the Mental Health Care Act that if there is a wandering patient in such circumstance, you have to first of all make an FIR, first information report in the Thana. And then the Thana, as per the 1987 Act, you have to again go to a magistrate, lodge a complaint, and then only the administrative authorities will take its recourse. So as because I stated earlier, in Jharkhand, still now Mental Health Care Act 2017 has not implemented. So as a result, 1987 Act was enacted. So I tried my level best, and by using my influence in here, I tried to put her in a Nari Niketan situated in Ranchi. Nari Niketan stated that I will take her in custody, but I will not give you any record, or I will not make any report. So tomorrow morning you please come, or today's night I am allowing, tomorrow morning you come and take her. So obviously we thought that अच्छा भैया कहीं तो जुगाड़ हुआ एक रात का. So we dropped her in that Nari Niketan. Next morning when we came there and inquired about that lady, the Nari Niketan officer said, भाग गया. So this is the condition of the law related to the wandering patients. So whenever you get a chance of meeting any wandering mentally ill patient, please try to cater their requirements. Okay, by filing now the procedure. If in your state the 2017 Act has come into enforcement, you can very well go and just file an FIR in the Thana, and the Thana will make appropriate arrangements for the purpose of that particular patient to be admitted in the mental hospital. This is the primary help which we can do. Okay, but let us think about another alternative, which could have been done by the legislatures. We are aware about the Good Samaritan clause, right? So in case of accident also this happened earlier. So if the same principles could have been adopted in this legislation, we could have given more benefit to this mentally challenged people, which has not been done by the legislatures. So wherever you will give me any question, I will obviously give you what is there and what remedy could have been given in the legislature. Both the things I will suggest. Yeah, next. Any other question?
So next,
Another question is,
Any other
yes,
question?
yes.
okay. So there's another question: how to deal with a mentally ill worker by a co-worker?
Worker is mentally ill. So obviously, in such circumstance, the treatment of that particular mentally ill worker has to be taken into consideration. So whenever you will admit him in a mental hospital, his work will be stopped as per the labor laws, though he will be getting the subsistence allowance. And until and unless he gets a fit certificate from the recognized authorities, he cannot join the service. So how to behave? It becomes very difficult. You have to behave properly, obviously. Take care of him. Yeah, any other question?
What is the difference between Mental Health Act of 1987 and 2017?
There I said na, that all these points which were mentioned in your slides were not at all existing in the 1987 Act. Mental health insurance not there, nominative representation not there, advance directives not there. So whatever points I have brought, the Mental Health Care Act 1987 only took into consideration the aspects of admission and discharge of the patient. Bharti karo or chodo. But there was a problem regarding it. Let's again come to this particular juncture and stop for a while. So when we look into this particular juncture, we find out at times these mental hospitals became the junkyard of mentally ill people. So what happened is that agar ghar mein koi bhi pagal hai, to bhaiya mukti pana hai, we want to get relief from this particular mentally ill people, take him and put him in a mental hospital and never come back to take him or her. So this happened here in Ranchi. We found out in the vicinity of Ranchi, several persons were roaming here and there with chains in their legs. Okay, that means they flee out from this mental hospital. So ultimately, there was a student studying in NUSRL itself, and his father, Rakesh Chandra Sinha, versus State of Bihar, filed a public interest litigation. He did not file, he just wrote a letter to the Supreme Court regarding this so many wandering patients in Ranchi. And after that, the Supreme Court gave specific directions. What directions it gave? That the identity of the patient must be taken into consideration. That's why once now you visit CIP or INPAS or any other mental hospital in anywhere in India, you have to submit the patient with the details of the caregiver. Who is a caregiver? The person who brings him. And his Aadhaar card has to be submitted along with his residential address. So abhi agar after the expiry of specific period, persons don't come, the authorities will pick that particular mentally challenged person and take all the expenses and put her back or him back to the residential address which has been given in your Aadhaar card. Clear? Yeah. Any other question?
Yes, so we can take up this last question, whether enactment of mental health law is sufficient rather than it is to be addressed as socio-legal problem.
Please. Okay. Obviously, it's a socio-legal problem. I said that the whole reason behind mental illness is only the social stigma which has been there in the society. Only 5% of the patients who are mentally ill see the face of a mental hospital. The rest 95% of the population who are mentally ill never see the mental hospital. They go to these babas or to these persons who are giving them the aid. So one suggestion again here, which could have been done, is that make them we have made paralegal servants, right? We have made para everywhere. So why not para mental health caregivers? Assign them a designation and then see, they will be supplying patients to the mental hospitals. हमसे ठीक नहीं होगा, आप hospital में जाके दिखाओ. There is a Davis hospital here, situated just in the vicinity of our university. So they say that most of the patients which come to Davis Hospital are referred by Babas. Witchcraft, which is again one of the issues of Jharkhand, Rajasthan. Okay, many times these people are not suffering from witchcraft, they are basically mentally ill. But when you go to the mental hospitals, you find out not a single patient has been reported yet who is suffering from witchcraft or is a victim of witchcraft. So obviously, this is the socio-economical issue. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for addressing the participant's query. Now, I welcome Dr. Kalpesh Kumar, founder of ProBono India, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Reha. Thank you very much, Koushik Shwas, for sparing your valuable time. I can see like it was we are feeling that we are, sitting in a classroom, right? And you have spent your valuable time and discussing the each and every aspect of, the starting from history and the legislations and the work that is being done by your university. And I'm happy to know that you are going to start this course, and I hope this will be the pioneer. I remember few years back I attended a course, or that was some program done by ILH, Indian Law Society. I hope you must be aware about. There is Center for Mental Health they are running. So first time I came to know this kind of law is there, and then what kind of implementation is there on ground. And then obviously this will be like a path breaking initiative by NUSRL. And then obviously many, like we can see there are some responses in the chat box. They're eagerly waiting for this course. So thank you very much. I behalf of, again, you are part of organizing committee, I won't say this thing. So thank you very much for your insightful lecture. So grateful to you. And thank you very much all the participants, Shreya, Has, Dr. Sweta, and Pooja Lakshmi for joining today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity for spreading this awareness regarding mental illness. I think most of the people in India are totally aware about the basic provisions of the Mental Health Care Act, what it can do and what it should do, what ought to be and law what is. So I am very much thankful to you, Kalpesh sir, for giving me this platform. I thank you because at least I could make aware of 111 people I can see in the participant list.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Giving me this
they have
opportunity.
lacked because they are busy. This is the first time we include this topic, and very good. I got connected to you, and then let me like 2-3 sessions are there very new in this. The fourth edition of this course, like community engagement and this mental health. Nobody's talking about this thing like for the years. Still, a lot of issues are there. Again, it's a wonderful session. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I think Shweta ma'am has raised her hand if she wants to speak anything. Shweta ma'am?
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
No, it's not that I want to ask a question. I'm just want to thank Bagchi sir for delivering such a wonderful lecture. Shreya, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, now you are audible.
Shreya, I just wanted to thank Bagchi sir and Kalpesh sir. Nothing more than that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So with this, we conclude this session. Until we meet again tomorrow, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.